could you do me a huge favor and make sure that your cell phones are turned all the way off, unless you're a doctor on call? That the idea here is that I'm going to put you to work. And I don't want mine to be distracted on your buzzing cell phone in your pocket. And also, it's a sadhana. I've discovered, in this modern age, people are addicted to looking at their cell phones and who's emailed me and who's texted me and this blah, blah, blah. And so in my mind, it's a sadhana to see, can we go through an hour or so without worrying about who is trying to get in touch with us? And if we do worry, I would ask you to notice it. So, you probably all started with chants and things. We're going to do a very familiar one for a reason. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So you all know the loose translation, loosely translated. The first part is a prayer. May we both together feel protected. May there be enjoyment. May we enjoy what we're doing. May there be enthusiasm and energy between us. But the last part, ma vidvishavahai, is where I want to focus just for a minute. In Sanskrit, it is a kind of a verb form that in Latin, I don't know, I can't remember anymore the Sanskrit term for it, but in Latin it's called an imperative desiderative verb. Okay, so imperative means we must. And here, so that's the ma. It doesn't mean ma, oh mother. It means ma, do not. Which sometimes in translations is softened to may we. And actually in this translation is turned around on its head, and you'll see why. Ma vidvishavahai. Dvish, dvesha. From the Sanskrit root dvish, to hate, to dislike, to be repulsed by. But in this case, sometimes it's called a desiderative, which means we desire to do the action that the verb is talking about. So the literal translation here is, may we not wish to hate each other or desire to hate each other. Vidvish. So why is that so important? Because often that's exactly what we're doing with our mind. We're carrying forward desires to be repulsed or desires to desire. Not just the desire itself, but the desire to desire the desire. And that's what keeps our life going. So I'm going to talk about the mechanism of mind that not so much rote by rote from the Yoga Sutra, but it's in basically chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras, the Sadhana Pada, I think it's called. And focusing on this part, the Yoga Sutras, you may or may not, who knows, are you familiar with the Yoga Sutras? Yes, no, sort of? Okay. Yoga Sutra is a possibly 2nd, 3rd century text, but much older, the teachings. Some people say it's influenced, this is a so-called Hindu text influenced by so-called Buddhists. Other people say it's a Buddhist Hindu text influenced by so-called Jains. In other words, it was a tradition that was around for a very long time that has become the basis of the psychology in most of the Indian traditions. And because the Indian traditions then migrated through Asia, it's become the basis of psychology of mind through much of Asia, traditional psychology of mind. And because the Asian religions have migrated over to the West, And many of the young people in the 60s and the 70s studied both Eastern and Western psychology. It is now, via the mindfulness movement, starting to become accepted psychology of the West with different terminology. So if you know me, you know that I'm not just going to stand here and talk, that you're going to have to work. And so I've tried to make this an experiential retreat. And so we're going to do a lot of meditations and self-examinations. And I'm going to ask a lot of rhetorical questions. And in the Q&A at the end, beware. There's one thing that I will always call somebody on. I feel very, very, very strongly that the way that we learn in spiritual life or in any life is to make whatever we hear our own. That, because I've had more than my share of people saying, well, it says right here, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I will immediately say, yes, but what does that mean to you? Tell me in your own language. Don't quote at me. And the reason is not because it's a kind of, the more that we think about these things as what they mean to me, not what they meant to Shankaracharya or what they meant to Gitaprana even, that what do they mean to me makes it so they're more right there in our daily life from moment to moment. We have to make them our own. That, yes, it's okay to go through life looking at quotes, but it's better to live those quotes. And to do that, we have to understand for ourselves. So if you know the Yoga Sutras, how many of you think this is way too hard for me? That I can't possibly do this. I have a life, I have a job, I have children. And this is for yogis in caves. How many of you think that? Just, you don't have to tell me, but just that you think, oh, this is just way too advanced, and I can't practice this. Right there, we just remember that you're thinking this. I'll maintain that we have to practice this. And in the way that we can, it's written, of course, 2nd and 3rd century, so it's written in that way, but the wonderful thing about these texts is they're timeless. So if we can understand them for ourselves, we can unlock their secrets in our own life. Now, I just gave this class to a bunch of people who'd never heard of anything like this before, and so I had to rewrite a little bit because I know that I'm not talking to that today. We're going to do a lot of deconstruction. What do I mean? That essentially we're talking about, Swami Yogatmanandaji just led this wonderful meditation about the One. So I'm going to skip right over the theology or the metaphysics and assume just exactly what he said, that we're talking about the One who appears as everything. And Yoga Sutra has one way of explaining it. There are many ways of explaining this. I'm going to skip right over those metaphysics because that could take all day, and actually many days. I'm going to make the assumption that underlying all of this is that one unlimited, undivided self, or Brahman, or God, call it whatever you like, truth, or reality. That, and like the Upanishad says, Tat Tvamasi, thou art that. That underlying our very consciousness sitting here in this room is that divine consciousness. That the Upanishad says, he or it shining, all shines. I believe that's literally true. And if we think of what would you say, an unnamed, unformed kind of light by which we're sitting here looking, thinking, hearing, that light is common to all. our looking, thinking, and hearing appear to be common only to us. But that very same light lights up our even smallest little thought. But we're unaware of it in a sort of way, while, as Sri Ramakrishna said, it's nearer to us than our very own breath. So that's the assumption I'm going to make at the very outset, thereby knocking one whole chapter out of the Yoga Sutras. We're going to deconstruct this word in English, mind, over the day. And the first deconstruction that we're going to do is to oust out of our mind the notion that there is such a thing. That there's something findable, something concrete, something unchangeable, this called mind, that I can find somehow if I carve open my brain. That we are going to agree at the outset that mind actually is a process, and without a fixed anything, like everything else, that we have all agreed in this human kind of a experience to call mind. And today we're going to talk about mind, what it is and how it functions, and why, sort of. Although the metaphysical question, why, cannot be answered. Although I'm not usually one to go start quoting Shankaracharya, we will use his very classical definition, Brahma Sat Jagat Mityam. And the reason why, Brahma Sat, Brahman is Sat. What is the truth? What is real? And Brahma can mean the one, the God, however you want to say. Jagat, which is Jagad when it sits next to Mithya, is the unreal. Jagat, this world, they say. But Jagat comes from the Sanskrit root jagri, to do this. Anything changing, everything, anything moving, that is not real. It appears to be solid. We appear to be, look, arms, look, head, look, me. But what is it? It's just moving and changing constantly, constantly, constantly. It's never, never there, sitting static at any point. And yet we feel like it's so solid. That's the mithya. Anything that moves, which is everything that we experience, including ourselves. That the self that was here this last second is gone. So, we want this to be experiential, because I'm going to make from the Yoga Sutras and the other points of view for the East, to a certain extent, we are creating our reality. And if we can catch the mechanism by which we do this, then we can become the master of it, rather than just be the slave of it, basically. To do that, we need some self-awareness, and we need self-honesty. Say, for instance, we spiritual aspirants do not like to admit always that we are angry or that we hate something, because we've been brainwashed. Well, not brainwashed. We've been hearing that we want to manifest the wonderful qualities of compassion and loving kindness and things. And so maybe instead of actually accepting where we are, we pretend like we're compassionate and loving kindness. We don't want to admit to ourselves, no, I don't hate anybody. Oh, I'm not angry. And in the very next breath, we say, oh, I was so impatient when I was behind that car. Well, folks, what is impatience? It's anger. I was frustrated because my computer, blah, blah, blah. What is frustration? It's aversion, again. So we try and use lesser words to fool ourselves. But in order to practice from the Yoga Sutras, we need to have a little bit of self-awareness and self-honesty. Doesn't matter what. No one's going to put a telephone line into what we think. But to practice, we need to know, here I am, just the way I am. And that's fine. And anything else would be a story. So, let's try another guided meditation. Where's the clock? Aha. And I have until what time?
11:15.
Okay. This time we're going to split our consciousness. And one is going to follow it, and the other is going to follow the follower. In other words, I will lead the meditation, and you will hear me and attempt to do what I say, follow it. But I also would like you to notice what your mind is doing as you attempt to follow. This is going to be a complicated visualization. How many of you are already telling yourselves, I can't do that? I'm not a visualizer. All right, here's a story that we've concocted. And, but it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong here. So notice that you thought that. I can't do that. I don't visualize. That's the watcher. This is what we want to cultivate. All right, so we close our eyes. And we imagine an infinite ocean of light. And in that infinite ocean, there is an island. And on that island is growing the beautiful and enormous, jewel-bedecked, wish-fulfilling tree, the Kalpataru. Everything is made of light. Nothing is solid. And sitting at the base of that beautiful, gorgeous, jewel-bedecked tree is our Ishtam, our chosen ideal. We are standing there in front of our Ishtam, who is looking straight at us with incredible love. And in the branches of this beautiful jewel tree are sitting every teacher we've ever known who inspired us. They could be alive. They could have passed away long, long, long ago. But sometime in our life, we felt inspired by them or their teachings. And they also are looking right at us with incredible love. And we understand that our human birth is fleeting. And at this moment, we have many, many, many privileges. We are not so sick we cannot get out of bed or on life support. We live in a country that is rarely, if ever, at war internally, so we are not in a war zone. We have enough to eat and do not spend our days simply trying to make enough money for food. We live in a country where we are able to do things like come to the Vedanta Society without the censure of society. In other words, where there is certain freedom of thought. Those are privileges, and those are things that are very, very, very rare. And we know one thing: they will come to an end. because there's one certain thing: we will die. So we will make the resolution in front of our Ishtam, who is looking at us with such incredible love. I will strive with this life to achieve my spiritual goal. No matter how many days, hours, months, years, or lifetimes it will take. And we will ask for the blessing of our teachers that we have now just taken a sankalpa, a resolution, in front of, and return slowly to the here and now in this apparent room. So for how many of you was that simple? A few. There are visualizers or people who practice this. The truth is, as you practice, it gets easier and easier. How many of you think this was just a fantasy and that it was just not real and it didn't happen? No Ishtam, no Kalpataru, I just put it in my mind. Some. How many of you think that all of this isn't a fantasy or a dream, and this is real? Just you don't have to tell me. Just think in your mind. Is somehow the meditation less real than sitting in this room? How many of you had no problem with the watcher? You could watch the way that your mind was going during this meditation. Or how many of you just got caught up in the meditation and you didn't have the guardian at the gate? That again, just notice. All right, we'll try another. We're playing mind games here for a reason. This is my favorite. Think of a dream. I hope that everyone here can remember dreams a little bit. And if you can't, then you could think of a fantasy, I suppose. And the best kind of dream to think of is the kind where it doesn't exactly match waking state. You know how dreams are, right? You can be riding in a car that suddenly morphs into a train and you don't think twice about it, right? Or the dream that I always use that I had not too long ago, about a year ago, is a wild dream where I was called into a room and told, well, you have to prepare for such and such an event. And I thought, oh, okay. So I started to go out to prepare, and I went to the next room, and there was like a chorus line in perfect formation of horses and zebras and I don't know what else, dancing on their hind legs. You know, all perfectly. Bharatanatyam style almost. So just in perfect formation. And I didn't think twice about it. It was just my mind said, okay, right? I totally accepted the conditions of that dream. And went on, and I don't remember what all else happened, but every goofy thing that went on, I just said, okay. I didn't say, hey, wait a minute. So dreams are mostly like that, yes? We just accept whatever weirdy thing happens. And we don't question for a moment that horses cannot be in formation dancing on their hind legs. No, no. We don't question it at all. But there's a couple things that could happen in dreams. One is we could suddenly say, hey, wait a minute. This is just too crazy. We start a little bit of lucid dreaming. we notice that something is a little bit not according to normal. And if we should notice that, a couple things could happen. One is we wake up. Another one is we observe, but the scenario keeps going. One is we notice, but immediately then we fall back into the dream again. In other words, we say, hey, something funny is going on here. And the next moment we've forgotten that we thought it was funny. And the dream continues. Another one that sometimes happens to me is we think, hey, this is a dream. That means I can do whatever I want because I'm creating it. Or, this is a nightmare. No, I'm not going there. I'm not going to experience this. I know this is a dream. Or we wake up and the dream is gone completely. So the reason why we're going through this little exercise is right here, right now, we are all doing the exact same thing. We are asleep and we are all accepting the terms of the dream without questioning them. Just exactly the way that we do in dreams. In the so-called waking state, we have accepted whatever happens as being true and real. And we never, or we rarely, we question them here because we're sitting here. But ordinarily, we would never, ever question the terms of this dream because it's so real, we are so asleep that we haven't figured out, or we've had glimpses and immediately fallen back into the dream. That's very common for people to have glimpses of reality and immediately fall back. Or glimpse enough to say, hey, I want to be out, but the illusion is so strong that we're pulled back in. And occasionally a soul wakes up and does not go back to sleep. Or a soul wakes up and says, oh, the terms of the dream are now mine to control. And those people are the souls that often you see helping the others. The Jivan Muktis, the Bodhisattvas, whatever you want to call them. So how does that happen? This little sleep. And this is where chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras really gets into the mechanics of it. So, how does the one appear to be divided and separate? There's many, many theories. But the way I usually explain it, the Yoga Sutras will say 5 kleshas are the source of this appearance here. I'm mixing up Vedanta, by the way, and Sankhya right now, so don't expect a coherent system. How does the one get here? As if. Why do I point to myself and say, this is me and that is not me? No, 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 no. Where am I? I'm right here. Where's my mind? Not over there, or not everything. But the truth of the matter is, it only appears to be localized here in this thing that I call me. So how does the one get to this state? The Upanishads, of course, have many stories about it, and no story is going to be adequate because, as Sri Ramakrishna said, anything that can be said is uchishta. That we're talking about the infinite, undivided, transcends any possible notion, any possible language, any possible thought. So every explanation that we try to use to explain it is going to fall short. A rabbi, it might have been Rabbi Cook, but I can't remember, said, the moment I open my mouth, the spirit has descended from its hiding place. Or my favorite is there's a Korean Zen master who wrote a book and it says, open mouth, already a mistake. In other words, no matter what we say about it, it's going to be a story. So Upanishads will try and explain many different ways how the one became many. What we're concerned about is, I'm the many, how do I become the one? That, in other words, our experience is of the many, and we think that the one is somewhere else, when in reality you are that. That one is right here, right now, and you are that. You don't have to get it from somewhere else. That the very first thing, that was the very first lesson I ever learned when I was, I guess, maybe about 20. That was my first interview with a Swami from the Ramakrishna order, Swami Swananda. And immediately he said to me, you don't get your liberation from somewhere else. In fact, you don't get it at all. It's already right there, right now. And this illusion that I am a little separate self is the covering over that. What Vedanta calls Maya. This little twist, this little metaphysical twist that suddenly the one, almost as if, forgets its oneness. And it's really difficult to explain. The one somehow can't perceive one in order for me to think I'm separate. So in goofy story language, we could say, the one does it to itself. In other words, Shiva has intentionally hidden himself in matter. So the one has disguised itself because oneness cannot know manyness. And manyness cannot know oneness. They're mutually exclusive. We'll get. So this little twist, this Maya, that causes this instant appearance of things, of me and not me. In the Yoga Sutras, and in Vedanta, that's called avidya, not knowing. That's the first of the kleshas. And don't think that they arise in a sequence. We have to describe them in a sequence because this is how we live, in a sequence. This is our experience. But the root of it all is this little twist that causes the one to become many. And instantaneously, the many all has a self and a not self. If there's no notion of oneness, then there's manyness, which we sometimes call duality. And instantly, simultaneously, arises what is called in the Yoga Sutras asmita. Asmi, I am. And in Vedanta, ahankara, the I maker. So if there's many, they're all little I's. Not E-Y-E, but yes, E-Y-E, but I mean I. So each many, each section has an I. And that I thinks of itself where? Yep, here. Think of it. Is your I somewhere else? Your mind might be somewhere else, but your I is sitting right here, probably. At least that's your experience, right? And even if you know this, and you've been telling yourself this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, still the habit of I is so strong that it's very difficult to override it. So we have this root of unknowing, this avidya, which is often translated as ignorance. But in English, ignorance has like almost a negative meaning. And this ignorance isn't necessarily negative or positive. This is just not knowing. And it's a specific kind of not knowing our true self, which is right here, right now, appearing to sit in this room listening to Gitaprana, who appears to be a separate person. And this not knowing is the basis of this person that's sitting here in a seat somewhere. This me, us me, I am. Now a snail is going to have a different sense of us me than a human. But nevertheless, a snail is an individual. And even bees, where they say that maybe have hive mind, they're still little individuals in certain ways. So maybe a little less. But after us me then, if there's a me, and there's not me, which is everything in this huge, now we're tiny, we appear to be tiny little separate beings in an enormous universe, or multiverse even. That's our experience. This is our dream that we're not waking up from. So, am I over my time?
No, you still have another 15 minutes.
Okay. So, we can go through the kleshas quickly, and then the next thing, the next session we'll talk about them. So, if there's a me, then what is all the rest of this? Not me. And what do I do with that? Yeah, I'm separate, and if I'm separate from it, what about it? What happens? There's things that I'm going to like. And actually, let's take it back a step. There's things that I need to survive, me, and there's things that I need to avoid to survive. And I need to die to survive. I mean, I need to desire to survive. So there's things I want to move toward. There's things I want to move away from. There's things that I have no knowledge of. And I want to project this sense of I into every moment. I want to survive. So, moving toward raga, this is the next of the kleshas. That is the polarity that we're about to talk about. Raga, from the Sanskrit root ranj, to dye red, actually. In other words, the longing desire. Not just, daily desires. We're talking about desires that catch us. Passionate desires. Passion isn't even really a good word either. Desires that really get us, and we can't let them go. Kama. The Bhagavad Gita, Raga Dvesha in the Yoga Sutras, it becomes Kama Krodha in the Bhagavad Gita. Kama, this kind of unsettled, magnetic desire. Moving towards something, zoop! I gotta have it. Happiness, for one. I have to be happy. And it's flip, it's opposite. Dvish, dvesha. Repulsion, dislike, hatred. I don't want that. No! So on one side we have yes! On the other side we have ah! And we spend our life doing that. That in a small way or a large way, if we observe our mind, if we start deconstructing what we're doing, it could be pretty benign or it could be not benign. But that's what we're doing. Oh, I really, really liked that, whatever it was, tart that Roshni brought this morning. Mine goes, yes! Let's see, think of a dislike. Somebody. Spiders. Oh, this is a good one. Think in your mind, okay, Roshni brought a tart. Think in your mind of a dessert you love. Think about it. Visualize it and see, how does your mind work? It's moving towards it, isn't it? Oh, yeah. It's saying, yeah. Now think this, and this is true. In Cambodia, because of the killing fields, the villagers didn't have much to eat. And so one thing that they learned how to do that now has evolved into a delicacy is catching and eating tarantulas. Now think of how your mind reacted to that. Away from, right? That did you feel your mind say, ugh? Right? So on one hand, mine went, yeah, for your nice, Rash Malai or whatever you imagined. But tarantulas, no. Now these are very simplistic examples, but we're doing that with complicated relationships, with on many, many, many levels. That's what we're doing. We're saying, yeah, no. And we're inventing stories that go along with the yes and no. This is the wonderful thing about humans, that our brains are such that, a slug will have attraction or repulsion according to its DNA. It will know, for the most part, what it needs to go towards to eat and what it needs to avoid until some human figures out how to fool it into eating poison. But we are not so smart. And we add layers upon layers upon layers of judgments and stories and things that we believe to be true that create our existence, that really are elaborate, progressions of basically moving towards something, yeah, or moving away from something, no. And we can feel that in our mind. And then there's another thing that happens. Our biggest desire is to continue. So the final of the 5 kleshas in the Yoga Sutras is called abhinivesha. In Buddhism, it's trishna, clinging. In other words, thirst, this thirst. What do we thirst for? For the next moment, basically. And so in a strange sort of way, we are actually projecting ourselves into the so-called next moment. We don't want to let go of this me. And it's very much not even conscious always, that I know a lot of people who have talked about experiences they've had in meditation where they felt like their sense, in fact, I can think of one from Swami Vivekananda's life, where they felt like their sense of identity was disappearing, and they reacted with fear, oh no! And you probably all know that story where one of the first times that Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda met Sri Ramakrishna touched him, and he felt his individuality and his whatever disappearing, and he said, what are you doing to me? I have a family. That's a perfect example of this kind of automatic gut-level reaction that a single me has sometimes, even when we don't want it to happen, even when we have meditated for years and years and years and years and years. I know people who have said, yes, I felt like that, and it was suddenly something that was so subconscious just reached out and grabbed me back into this level of consciousness, and I am really irritated. So why does this have to happen? I've meditated for so many years. Why? The truth of the matter is this abhinivesha, this clinging, is a very strongly ingrained pattern. So these 5 patterns arise, we could say, almost against our will, from our daily experience. Here they are, and this is how we experience things. That as a me, we don't most of the time feel the unity. We don't feel that God. We think God is somewhere else, in the altar, in some loka, something, but not here. And that's the avidya, that's the unknowing. That right here, right now, especially according to Advaita Vedanta, thou art that. And as Swami Vivekananda said, which I think is a wonderful thing to remember, is when you are in India and there's a field of water pots filled with water in the sunshine, you can imagine this. Imagine a field full of pots filled with water, and the sun is shining overhead. And you look into the pots. Do you see part of the sun, or do you see the whole of the sun? You see the whole, right? So in the same way, in some mysterious way that we can't comprehend because we're so stuck in space and time, the whole of the divine is sitting in every individual being, not part. This is the Advaitic position, that we're not all just little sections of the divine and all sections added together equals God, and then more. That the whole of God is sitting in each one of us. And the reason we don't believe this is because of avidya. Because we don't experience it. And instead what we experience is being divided and separate in a huge, huge universe. And insignificant. How could I possibly be the whole of that divine? Okay, I can see part. Yeah, I could see that. But the whole of it, how could that be? Because our experience of separation is the avidya. It's the unknowing. It's the maya. And some teachers have explained the word maya from the Sanskrit root ma, to measure. And what are we doing here? If there's a self, a me, what am I doing? Everything else that I do is measuring. Even my thoughts are measuring, because the one does not need to think. Yeah? Why would the one think if there is nothing to think about? So there does not need to be thought. There does not need in the one. That it's all, this is the measuring. This is the fascination we have with measuring everything. And of course, humans measure with our mind, with our thoughts. And we've taken the measure of everything constantly. And so, according to this avidya, we believe that to be true. This is our experience. This is our, what do you call this? What's that word? When you can see it and feel it, and that science uses the, what is that word? The, not pragmatic. I can see it, I can feel it, I can hear it. It's according to my senses, therefore it's real. Tangible, evidential, this is what I experience, this is the reality. So if I can't, if it's something else that I'm experiencing, then, well, maybe it's not really real. Say, for instance, the meditation that we did, or the meditation that Swami Yogatmanandaji did before we even started. Those, can't measure it really except with my thought. So this is the mechanism, according to the Yoga Sutras, according to the ancient tradition, for how we experience what we experience. It starts with not knowing, which in a certain way we can't say we control. It's just like we could say a fact of life, that we can't go in our mind yet, maybe, and say, okay, I'm turning this unknowing switch off. That it's just almost as if done for us. And you know the story about, I think, Brahma, the creator, and it's in one of the Upanishads, who desired to create, so he created 5 sons. You know, and they all started, their names were Sanat, Kumara, and all the S's. But those sons he did not create with enough unknowing, right? So the sons immediately merged back because the unknowing wasn't strong enough. Basically is what the Upanishad says, not quite like that, but so he had to create a little more unknowing. And I think that happened again. Okay, they went on for a little bit, and then suddenly they knew their own true nature, and so eventually he said, okay, got to be really unknowing. And that's us. So, but at the base of this, at the core here, the core to remember is that everything that we think no matter how bizarre and unknowing it is riding on the consciousness of that one. That no one, we're not going to be here to think it or be confused or whatever we think. It's all because of the basis of that one singularity. Call it Brahman, call it God, call it whatever you like, Shiva, Vishnu, Divine Mother. On the basis of that, we're sitting here wondering, what is she talking about? Which is kind of funny in itself. The one is actually sitting here being confused by the one who's talking about the oneness. And that, as Swami Vivekananda would say, is Maya. And we love our Maya. Because our whole existence is based in this. And it's ingrained in our DNA to measure. Yeah. So the next moment, here I am, yeah, going next moment, and it's all a dream. So the spiritual practice, of course, of the Yoga Sutras and all spiritual practices in their own way are aimed at waking up from this dream in various ways. So we'll go into that, the basis of at least the disturbing part of the kleshas in the next section. And in the meantime, you can just kind of see how, think, I'm nothing other than Brahman. My aunt, who was a devotee, disciple of Swami Ashokananda from San Francisco from the age of 17, used to make a spiritual practice of this. Well, here's Brahman in the form of a cat, and here's Brahman in the form of me, and here's, she made a spiritual practice of it, and she never left her house, ever, without first burning a stick of incense, and going around to everything and saying, "Goodbye, almighty Brahmaloka Vasins, we shall return, by your grace." But in other words, what she was doing was feeding the opposite constantly into her brain. The opposite of our usual perception. So that's kind of a sneak preview of